A stereotypical evil dwells within the subconscious of science fiction and fantasy. It embodies our worst fears and deepest desires. A figure cloaked in darkness, inscrutable, whose mention quickens the heart and sends the bones trembling. Darth Vader, the masked, sinister agent of the Galactic Empire. Lord Voldemort and the shadowy Death Eaters of Harry Potter. Most of these characters and creations spread despair, but few are its true manifestation. There are creatures so vile and black that horror isn't simply something they use, but rather what they have become. This is the terror of the Nazgul, the Ringwraiths of Lord of the Rings. For those unfamiliar with Tolkien's Middle-earth, the Nazgul are 9 powerful servants of the Dark Lord Sauron, who himself acts as antagonists throughout the main Lord of the Rings storyline. Also known as Ringwraiths and Black Riders, the Nazgul once were proud kings of men, gifted rings of power by the Dark Lord and ultimately corrupted to his evil will. They're now his messengers, his word and desire given shape. Cloaked and cowled in black robes, saddled atop black steeds, they embrace the color's symbolic notes of death, darkness, and the unknown. Terrifying with sword and versed in black magic, the Ringwraiths cast all in despair. So great is their prowess that not even the skills of the wizard Gandalf or Aragorn, inheritor of the Kingdom of Gondor, could stop the 9 united. But beyond spells or steel, the Nazgul's greatest weapon is the fear that spreads and shatters wills. As Aragorn tells the hobbits, in dark and loneliness they are strongest. Their power is in terror. They don't merely wield dread, they are its embodiment, its symbolic and physical manifestation, making them all the more dreadful. In the Fellowship of the Ring, the heroes infrequently cross paths with, but flee constantly in anticipation of, the Black Riders. An aura of impending, inexorable doom crushes the hobbits even when the Ringwraiths are absent. This power is known as the Black Breath, inherent to all Nazgul. It isn't quite a spell or magic, but the very essence of terror emanating from their incorporeal forms. The miasma strikes at the heart and soul of its victims, seizing them with what is often described as unreasoning fear. We hear as a mounted Nazgul descends, that at that moment a shadow fell over them. The bright moonlight seemed to be suddenly cut off. Several of the riders cried out and crouched, holding their hands above their heads, as if to ward off a blow from above. A blind fear and a deadly cold fell on them. The Black Breath casts a pall on those it claims, and they called it the Black Shadow, for it came from the Nazgul, and those who were stricken with it fell slowly into an ever deeper dream, and then passed to silence and a deadly cold, and so died. Even the strong escape marked, tarnished by a stain that goodness and light must constantly banish. This is the nature of fear. It's always present and feeds off anxiety, indecision. The absence of light or warmth, the dominance of chilling despair illustrates the Ringwraiths' presence. Their inhuman shrieks, cold as steel and sharp as daggers, pierce moonless nights. The hobbits had heard just such a cry far away in the Marish as they fled from Hobbiton, and even there in the woods of the Shire, it had frozen their blood. Out here in the wastes, its terror was far greater. It pierced them with cold blades of horror and despair, stopping heart and breath. Later, when the Kingdom Gondor stands isolated and beset by Sauron's evil forces, the Nazgul lend their presence to the siege. Hopelessness ripples through the ranks, as does profound resignation. And yet their presence could be felt as a deepening of shadow and a dimming of the sun. And though the Ringwraiths did not yet stoop low upon their foes and were silent, uttering no cry, the dread of them could not be shaken off. Few things exist that are more terrifying. Beneath their cloaks, nothingness, for their bodies have long since decayed, and their spirits thinned into the wraith world. They are ethereal phantoms that dwell in the unseen realm. Because of this, they are fearsome. Nazgul are indeterminate and indescribable. When cloaked, they resemble people, but they are something else entirely, which only makes the comparison more unsettling. They exist without true form, possess power beyond comprehension, and command the unknowable. This feeds off our inherent fear of both death and the unknown. Humans grasp for the tangible, seek to understand what's before them. When they can do neither, panic takes root. Our minds are powerful and vulnerable. As the Stoic philosopher Seneca puts it, we suffer more often in imagination than we do in reality. A shadow in the dark stirs the mind to conjure images far more terrifying than reality, and this is how the Nazgul destroy resistance. The fear that precedes them gives the Ringwraiths power. To understand this power, let's quickly look at the neurobiology of fear and its response. Fear is an emotional and physical reaction hardwired into organisms to protect against perceived threat to their integrity or existence. Perceived is paramount here. It doesn't have to be a true threat, just one the brain thinks is true, which the Nazgul manipulate in their prey, greatly enhancing dread. Further, there's a neurological separation between the emotional or reacting brain and the thinking brain. Stimuli trigger the fear response in lower levels of the brain that are then modified by higher cognitive levels to determine context and nature of response. For example, if we anticipate the fear from a scary movie or jumps from a haunted house, we quickly suppress the emotional brain, knowing full well we aren't in any real danger. Perhaps the Nazgul's mere presence and the Black Breath sever communication between these two brains, allowing the emotional brain to run rampant with the unreasoning fear the novels so often describe. On top of that, any imbalance between fear in the emotional brain and the sense of control in the thinking brain may cause too much excitement. The Nazgul's prey are quite literally stricken dumb, unable to control their thoughts or bodies. Of humanity's greatest fears beyond death and the unknown, there's also fear of suffering and loss of freedom, all of which the Nazgul wholly represent. Not only do the Nine cause great suffering, but they share in it with their victims. They serve a dark and evil master whose force goes against the wills they once had, and their existence as wraiths only prolongs suffering. The Nazgul aren't among the living, nor can they pass peacefully into death. And again, we see the loss of freedom in their enthrallment. The Nine Rings of Power destroyed the Nazgul's agency and transformed them into Sauron's pawns. The Nazgul are distorted mirrors, the convexities of which reflect and amplify worry beyond proportions. But their image isn't so perverted that we can't see within them parts of ourselves, which I think only enhances the Ringwraiths' dread. To those who oppose Sauron, the Nine represent ultimate failure. There are constant reminders of the future that awaits all should the Dark Lord succeed: eternal agony and helpless servitude. Yes, the Nazgul embody fear of death, of suffering, of the unknown, but they also represent the vices that stir deep within all hearts. Tolkien's tales of Middle-earth took in part inspiration from Christianity, and religious symbolism is inferred in many settings, characters, and scenes throughout his writing. The Nazgul can then be interpreted as sin incarnate, or else the terrible existence of those who have sinned. To the Church, sin is spiritual disease that attacks conscience and ultimately kills the soul. We see in the Nazgul the symptoms of such. They are diseased in spirit, and their soul is destroyed, leaving behind hollow wraiths. The deadly sins of pride, greed, and envy are especially poignant to the Nazgul, who in life fell victim to these vices, which became chains that bound them to Sauron's will. The kings, empowered by their magical rings, swelled with pride as their lands expanded in scope or greatness. They were perhaps envious of the timelessness enjoyed by elder races that they as men were denied, and jealous of their own growing wealth. Such feelings stoked paranoia, induced avarice, and worked to indelibly darken their hearts, leading them to ruin. As wraiths, the Nazgul symbolize the fall from virtue and grace. Their spirits linger, twisted in agony, suffused with dread, and bent to evil. When cast in this light, as men whose souls have lost their way, one can't help but be stirred to sympathy. For all their foul ways, the Nazgul are tragic figures in Middle-earth. Their existence isn't one they themselves desire, and perhaps not one they would wish on their greatest enemies. A passage from the Silmarillion is revealing. those who used the 9 rings became mighty in their day. Kings, sorcerers, and warriors of old. They obtained glory and great wealth, yet it turned to their undoing. They had, as it seemed, unending life, yet life became unendurable to them. This is a common fictional motif in which a wish is perverse. A desire is fulfilled, but not in the way imagined. The 9 didn't realize the cost to attain their dreams. It continues. Too often they beheld only the phantoms and delusions of Sauron, and one by one, sooner or later, according to their native strength and to the good or evil of their wills in the beginning, they fell under the thraldom and under the domination of the One. These men were all deceived by Sauron, and many may even have harbored good intentions, but their wills were ultimately crushed, and evil consumed their hearts. Theirs is a cautionary tale against sinful vices. The knowledge that one could fall as they had and join the ranks of darkness, a life of unendurable torment, even with a stout and humble spirit, heightens the Nazgul's dread. To become part of their host is a fate worse than meeting their steel. But in the Nazgul's defeat rests their ultimate symbolism. They feed off fear and heightened paranoia. It's their greatest weapon, and yet, their hidden weakness. Those whose hearts are true and wills unyielding possess an inner light that banishes the Ringwraiths' darkness. While the Nazgul hunt Aragorn and the hobbits around Weathertop, Frodo summons enough courage to strike at his foes while invoking the heavenly name Elbereth, causing the race to retreat, then flee. And later, during the skirmishing that precedes the siege of Gondor, men from Gondor are harassed by a winged black rider. Gandalf, a source of light, peace, and strength, rides across Pelennor Field and banishes the creature. The Nazgul gave a long, wailing cry and swerved away, and with that, the 4 others wavered, and then rising in swift spirals, they passed away eastward, vanishing into the lowering clouds above. And down on the Pelennor, it seemed for a while less dark. Such confrontations represent the great clash of good against evil and ascendancy of light over darkness. With fear excised, the Ringwraiths' power dwindles and they are overcome. Their form is an emotion, their existence a feeling. When terror is tamed, the Ringwraiths are left largely defenseless, banished again to the dark recesses of the mind. The black-clad villain, the cloaked and mysterious Dark Lord who elicits both fear and dread. It's a common image across fiction and fantasy, yet no being embraces such terror as the Ringwraiths of Middle-earth. Thanks so much for watching this video on the Nazgul, the true face of terror. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts on the Ringwraiths, any other fictional creatures you think embody dread, as well as suggestions for future videos in the comments below. See you in the next one.